My bride admitted during our first dance that she only married me for the military benefits, and she's already filed for my life insurance policy increase. The DJ was playing At Last by Etta James when my wife of 43 minutes leaned into my ear and whispered, "I increased your SGLI to 400,000 last week. You signed the paperwork, remember?" Her breath smelled like champagne and something else, something metallic, like fear or calculation. I kept swaying because 200 people were watching us, phones raised, capturing what they thought was a perfect moment. My dress blues suddenly felt too tight around my throat. The ballroom of the Riverside Inn spun slowly under fairy lights my mother had hung herself, and I realized with absolute clarity that I didn't know the woman in my arms at all. She pulled back just enough to smile at the cameras, and I saw it. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It never had. I'd been stationed at Fort Bragg for 18 months when I met Vanessa Holbrook at a charity run for wounded veterans. She was volunteering at the water station, laughing with the other volunteers, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that swung when she moved. I was finishing my second deployment rotation and had 3 months of leave coming. She handed me a cup of water and said something about my unit patch. She recognized the 82nd Airborne insignia because her grandfather had served. That detail should have been my first clue. Looking back, everything about our meeting was choreographed, but I was 26, tired of war zones, and she made me feel like someone worth coming home to. We dated for 8 months. She came to every homecoming ceremony, sent care packages overseas, learned military acronyms, and never complained when I had to cancel plans for last-minute training exercises. My parents loved her. My battle buddies called me lucky. The first strange detail I noticed was 3 weeks before the wedding. We were at the base housing office, and Vanessa asked the clerk about dependent housing allowances before I could even sit down. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Gloria Brennan, looked at me with raised eyebrows, but I laughed it off. "She's just eager to start planning," I said. Vanessa squeezed my hand and smiled that smile again. That night, I told myself she was being practical. Military spouses needed to understand the benefits system. It was smart, not suspicious. But my hands shook slightly as I brushed my teeth, and I couldn't explain why. The bathroom mirror showed a man trying to convince himself of something he didn't quite believe. I splashed cold water on my face and decided I was being paranoid. Combat deployment does that. Makes you see threats everywhere, even in the woman you're going to marry. The second incident happened during our cake tasting. The baker asked about our song choice, and Vanessa said, "At Last," without hesitation. I'd never mentioned that song. When I asked her about it later, she said she'd heard me humming it. I hadn't. I don't even particularly like that song. It was my mother's favorite. But Vanessa had already paid the deposit, already confirmed it with the DJ, already made it part of our story she'd been telling people. I drove home in silence while she scrolled through her phone, typing rapidly. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "Just confirming stuff with the venue," she said without looking up. The screen brightness reflected in her eyes, and I caught a glimpse of a name I didn't recognize. D. Sutton. When I asked, she locked her phone. "Wedding planner," she said. We didn't have a wedding planner. My stomach dropped, but I didn't push. Looking back, that was my mistake. I was already making excuses for her in my head. 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from training to find Vanessa on the phone in our apartment. She was in the bedroom with the door closed, but I heard fragments. "Increase the policy maximum. He doesn't read anything carefully. After the deployment." She ended the call when she heard me. When I asked who she'd been talking to, she said it was the florist confirming centerpieces, but I'd heard the words policy and deployment. That night, I went through our shared email account while she was in the shower. There were confirmations from USAA, TRICARE enrollment forms, and beneficiary designation updates were all opened and read by her, none by me. I found an email thread about service members' group life insurance that I didn't remember starting. My hand hovered over the mouse, ready to click, but then Vanessa came out wrapped in a towel, smelling like vanilla, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I closed the laptop. I told myself marriages required trust. I told myself I was being a paranoid soldier who couldn't turn off his threat assessment training. I told myself a lot of lies that week. The wedding day itself was perfect on the surface. My mother cried during the ceremony. My father shook hands with Vanessa's parents, quiet people who'd driven in from Ohio and barely said 10 words the entire weekend. My best man, Corporal Daniel Reeves, made a speech about brotherhood and finding peace after war. Vanessa's maid of honor, a woman named Jessica I'd only met twice, gave a generic toast about love and friendship. During the ceremony, when the chaplain asked if anyone objected, there was the traditional silence. But I felt something, a held breath in the room like someone wanted to speak but didn't. I scanned the crowd. Most faces were smiling, but in the back row, I saw a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize. He wasn't smiling. He was watching Vanessa with an expression I'd seen before in briefings about hostile surveillance. Clinical, assessing. When I blinked, he was gone. Probably a +1 I hadn't met. I turned back to my bride and said, "I do." The reception blurred past in a series of photographs and small talk. My unit commander, Captain Leslie Granger, pulled me aside to congratulate me and remind me about my deployment orders. I was heading back to Afghanistan in 6 weeks for a 12-month rotation. Make sure your affairs are in order, she said, meaning paperwork and powers of attorney. Your wife will need access to everything while you're gone. I nodded. Vanessa had already asked about that. She'd already printed the forms. She'd already highlighted where I needed to sign. And I'd signed them, one night after 3 beers, barely reading the dense legal language. You're taking care of me, she'd said, kissing my neck. I'm taking care of us, I'd replied. Now, standing in the reception hall with Captain Granger's words hanging in the air, I felt ice water in my veins. Affairs in order. Access to everything. 12 months away. $400,000 in life insurance. Then came the first dance. The opening notes of At Last filled the ballroom, and everyone formed a circle around us. Phones came out. My mother was crying again. Vanessa's smile was dazzling as she stepped into my arms. We swayed, and she fit perfectly against me, her head on my chest, exactly where it had been dozens of times before. But this time, her body was rigid. Her breathing was controlled, not relaxed. And then she spoke. I increased your SGLI to $400,000 last week. You signed the paperwork, remember? The words were so casual, so matter-of-fact, that for a moment my brain couldn't process them. SGLI, Service Members Group Life Insurance, the policy that paid out if I died, the maximum coverage, and she'd increased it, without discussing it, and I'd signed something. When? The forms from that night. The highlighted sections. You're taking care of me. I kept dancing because stopping would cause a scene, and soldiers don't cause scenes at their own weddings. Why are you telling me this? I whispered back, still swaying. She lifted her head and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Flat, empty, calculating. Because you're leaving in 6 weeks, and I need you to understand something. This isn't about love. This was never about love. You're a means to an end. Her voice was steady, almost kind, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I'm 29 years old. I've got $60,000 in student debt, no health insurance, and I was living in my parents' basement when we met. You're an Army sergeant with guaranteed income, full benefits, housing allowances, and a dangerous deployment coming up. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood. My brain understood. But my body kept moving through the dance like it was on autopilot. People were still filming. My mother was still crying. The song kept playing. You married me for benefits, I said. The words sounded stupid, inadequate. I married you because soldiers die in Afghanistan, she corrected, and $400,000 changes my life. The song ended. Everyone applauded. We smiled for photos. Vanessa kissed me for the cameras and her lips were cold. We cut the cake. We did the bouquet toss. We made our rounds to each table, thanking guests, accepting congratulations, playing our roles perfectly. I shook hands and hugged relatives and promised to write from overseas. Vanessa laughed at jokes and posed for selfies and talked about how excited she was to be a military wife. And I performed right alongside her because what else could I do? Stand up and announce to 200 people that my marriage was a financial transaction? That my wife was essentially betting on my death? That I'd been conned by someone who'd studied me like a target? My unit was there. My commander was there. My parents had spent $15,000 on this wedding. So I played along, and with each passing hour, each forced smile, each congratulatory handshake, I felt myself splitting into 2 people. The man everyone saw, and the man who was screaming inside. Around 11 p.m., we cut out early as planned, rice and cheers and waving goodbye. We drove to the hotel in silence. The honeymoon suite had rose petals on the bed that housekeeping had arranged. Vanessa went straight to the bathroom without looking at me. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. 43 text messages, 26 photos tagged on social media. Best day ever. So happy for you guys. Beautiful couple. I opened my banking app and checked our joint account, the one we'd opened 3 months ago, for wedding expenses and future planning. Vanessa had access. I scrolled through the transactions. Payments to USAA, transfers to an account I didn't recognize, a $4,000 withdrawal labeled insurance premium. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. When Vanessa came out of the bathroom in a silk robe, I was still staring at the screen. We need to talk, I said. She sat in the chair across from the bed, not beside me. There's nothing to talk about, she replied. You're my husband now. It's legal. It's done. I didn't sleep that night. Vanessa did, curled on her side of the bed, breathing steadily, like she hadn't just detonated my entire world. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship through a new lens. The way she'd approached me at that charity run, not random, but targeted. The way she'd learned everything about my deployment schedule, my benefits, my family. The way she'd rushed the wedding, saying she didn't want to wait, didn't want a long engagement, wanted to be married before I deployed again. I'd thought it was romantic. It was strategic. Every I love you had been a performance. Every intimate moment had been an investment. Every plan we'd made for our future was just her securing her financial exit strategy. And the worst part, the part that made my stomach turn, was that it was all legal. We were married. She was entitled to my benefits. And if I died in Afghanistan in 6 weeks, She'd get $400,000. No investigation, no questions, just a payout to a grieving widow. The next morning, I drove us home in silence. Vanessa scrolled her phone, already posting honeymoon photos with captions about forever and my hero. When we got to our apartment, I went straight to the filing cabinet where we kept important documents. I found the SGLI form she'd mentioned, signed by me, dated 3 weeks ago, increasing my life insurance to the maximum coverage with Vanessa as the sole beneficiary. My signature was real. I remembered now, she'd handed me a stack of papers one night, said they were updates for the deployment, and I'd signed without reading. Standard military procedure was to review these documents with a legal officer, but she'd convinced me we could handle it ourselves. Save time, she'd said. I'd trusted her. I pulled out every document in the cabinet. Power of attorney, broad, covering all financial and legal decisions. Dependent ID card applications, processed. TRICARE health insurance enrollment, completed. Direct deposit forms, our joint account. Housing allowance paperwork, listing her as dependent. Everything was in order. Everything was legal. And I'd helped her do it. I called Daniel, my best man, at noon. Something's wrong, I said. With what? With my marriage, with Vanessa. I need help. There was a pause. You've been married less than 24 hours, brother. Cold feet is normal. It's not cold feet. She told me she married me for the benefits, for my life insurance. She's waiting for me to die overseas. Another pause, longer this time. That's a serious accusation. Are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood? I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, but I played back the conversation word for word, the tone, the calculation, the explicit statement about soldiers dying in Afghanistan. I'm sure, I said. Then you need to talk to JAG immediately. Get a lawyer, document everything. JAG, the Judge Advocate General's Corps, military lawyers who handle legal issues for service members. I'd never needed them before. My deployment is in 6 weeks, I said. If I start legal proceedings now, it'll affect my readiness status. Could delay my deployment. Better delayed than dead, Daniel replied. That sentence hung in the air. Better delayed than dead. Was that really what this was about? Did my wife actually want me dead? Monday morning, I requested an appointment with the base legal office. The paralegal, a staff sergeant named Nicole Brenner, took my information and scheduled me for Wednesday morning with Captain Austin Reed, one of the JAG attorneys. What's the nature of your legal issue? She asked. I hesitated. How do you summarize this? Potential marriage fraud, I finally said. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw the flicker of recognition. She'd seen this before. Bring all documentation, she said. Marriage certificate, financial records, insurance policies, any written or electronic communications that support your concerns. Captain Reed will advise you on options. I left feeling marginally better. At least I was doing something. But when I got home, Vanessa was waiting. Where were you? She asked. Not casual curiosity. Pointed. Controlling. Had to check in with the unit about deployment prep. I lied. She studied my face. Don't do anything stupid, she said. We're married now. You can't just walk away. And if you try to claim fraud, you'll have to prove it. Good luck with that. I've been the perfect military girlfriend for 8 months. Photos, emails, witnesses. Everyone thinks we're in love. That night, I started documenting everything. I opened a new email account she didn't know about. I screenshotted every text message we'd ever exchanged, every social media post, every photo. I went back through our relationship timeline and wrote down every red flag I'd ignored. The rushed engagement, the focus on benefits, the way she'd isolated me from friends who might have questioned things, the way she'd scheduled the wedding right before my deployment. I found the email thread about SGLI and forwarded it to my secure account. I photographed every document in our filing cabinet. And I started recording our conversations on my phone, keeping it in my pocket during every interaction. It felt paranoid. It felt like betrayal. But she'd already betrayed me in a way I was still trying to fully comprehend. I wasn't going to deploy overseas without protecting myself first. Wednesday morning, Captain Austin Reed's office was utilitarian. American flag, military awards on the wall, a desk covered in case files. He was mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of focused intensity that comes from dealing with military legal crises daily. I sat across from him and laid out everything. The wedding day confession, the insurance increase, the financial documentation, the timeline. He listened without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Sergeant, I'm going to be direct with you. What you're describing is potentially marriage fraud under military law, marrying solely to obtain benefits. But it's also incredibly difficult to prove. Your wife could claim she developed feelings after marriage, that the comments were taken out of context, that she was joking during an emotional moment. The fact is, you voluntarily married her. You signed the documents. The relationship appeared legitimate to outside observers. Unless you have concrete evidence of premeditation or conspiracy, this becomes a he said, she said situation that rarely ends well for the service member. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from our honeymoon suite. Vanessa's voice came through clearly. I married you because soldiers die in Afghanistan. $400,000 changes my life. Captain Reed's expression didn't change, but he replayed it twice. This is good. This establishes her stated intent. But I need you to understand something. Even with this, she could argue emotional distress, claim she was venting frustration, say she didn't mean it literally. Defense attorneys are very good at creating reasonable doubt. He paused. However, this gives us enough to open an investigation. I'm going to refer this to CID, the Criminal Investigation Division. They handle fraud cases. I'm also going to recommend you immediately revoke her power of attorney, change your beneficiary designations, and separate your finances. You can't undo the marriage instantly, but you can protect yourself from further financial exploitation. Do you have somewhere else to stay during the investigation? Because if CID gets involved, they'll likely interview her, and your living situation could become hostile. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I can stay on base in the barracks temporarily, I said. My unit will understand. Captain Reed nodded. Do that today. Pack your essentials when she's not home and leave a note that you're staying on base for pre-deployment training. Don't engage in arguments, don't make accusations. Let CID handle the investigation. In the meantime, I'll start the paperwork to revoke the power of attorney and change your SGLI beneficiary back to your parents as primary. You'll need to sign new forms in front of a notary. He handed me a business card. This is Special Agent Troy Fleming with CID. I've already sent him a preliminary message. He'll contact you within 24 hours. Be completely honest with him. Provide all documentation. And Sergeant? He met my eyes. I've seen variations of this before. Predators target military members specifically because of the benefit structure. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Don't blame yourself for missing the signs. These people are professionals at deception. I left Captain Reed's office feeling both validated and terrified. Validated because someone believed me. Terrified because I'd just set in motion an official criminal investigation into my wife of 5 days. I went back to the apartment at 2 p.m. when I knew Vanessa had her twice-weekly yoga class. I packed 2 duffel bags with uniforms, personal items, and my laptop. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Staying on base for pre-deployment training. We'll be in touch. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I just left. The drive to base housing felt like escape. I checked into temporary barracks and sat on the narrow bed, staring at my phone, waiting for Vanessa to call. She didn't. Not that night. Not the next day. Radio silence. That somehow felt worse than anger. It meant she was planning something. Special Agent Troy Fleming called me Thursday afternoon. He was mid-40s, former Army Ranger turned investigator, with a voice that commanded attention without being aggressive. Sergeant, I've reviewed Captain Reed's referral and the evidence you provided. I'd like to meet in person to take a formal statement. Are you available tomorrow morning at 0800? I confirmed. One more thing, he added. Don't contact your wife. Don't discuss the investigation with anyone except your attorney. Don't post anything on social media. Anything you say or do can affect the case. Understood? Understood, I replied. That night, I lay in the barracks and thought about Vanessa. Was she scared? Angry? Planning her defense? Or was she already moving on, calculating her next move? I pulled up her social media. She'd posted a photo from our wedding with the caption, "Missing my husband already. 6 weeks until deployment. Counting down the days." The comments were full of heart emojis and stay strong messages. She was playing the devoted military wife perfectly, and everyone believed her. Friday morning, I sat in an interview room at the CID field office and gave Special Agent Fleming a 3-hour statement. He recorded everything, asked detailed follow-up questions, and requested copies of all documentation. I'm going to be honest with you, he said when we finished. We're looking at possible violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1347, fraud against military members. If we can prove she entered the marriage with intent to defraud you of benefits, particularly life insurance, it's a federal offense. But we need more than a recording and suspicious timing. We need a pattern. Has she done this before? Are there other victims? Is there evidence of planning before she met you? I hadn't considered that. How would you find that out? Fleming smiled grimly. That's my job. I'm going to pull her financial records, interview people from her past, check if she's been married before or has a history of targeting service members. These investigations take time, but if there's a pattern, we'll find it. 3 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. She's done this before. That was it. No name. No context. I forwarded it to Fleming immediately. He called within an hour. Don't respond to that number. We're tracing it, but it confirms what I suspected. Someone out there knows something. 2 hours after that, Fleming called again. The number belongs to a Bradley Colton, former Marine Corps sergeant stationed at Camp Lejeune. I spoke with him. He married a woman named Vanessa Holbrook 3 years ago. She filed for divorce 8 months later after he returned from deployment. She'd increased his life insurance, taken out loans in his name, and emptied their joint account while he was overseas. He didn't press charges because he just wanted it over. But he's willing to testify if it helps your case. He's been tracking her online ever since, warning people. When he saw your wedding photos posted by mutual friends, he got your number from a military directory. My hands went numb. She's done this before. Exactly the same pattern. Worse, Fleming said. We found a third victim, another soldier, name of Gregory Penn. Stationed at Fort Hood. Same story. Met her at a military event. Whirlwind romance, rushed wedding, insurance increase, deployment. She divorced him after 12 months. He had no idea about the others until we contacted him. We're building a case for systematic fraud, but I need to tell you something else. We searched her financial records. She's in communication with someone else, a David Sutton. He's got a criminal record for insurance fraud and identity theft. We think he might be coaching her. We're pulling his phone records now. David Sutton. D. Sutton. The name from her phone before the wedding. This wasn't just about her. This was organized. The investigation accelerated. Fleming brought in FBI assistance because of the interstate fraud connections. Vanessa had lived in 3 different states while targeting military members. Special Agent Rachel DeMarco, FBI White-Collar Crime Division, 15 years investigating financial fraud, joined the case. They executed a search warrant on Vanessa's phone and laptop. What they found was damning. Years of messages with David Sutton, planning operations, identifying targets at military charity events, and online support groups for service members. Spreadsheets tracking deployment schedules, templates for forged documents, research on SGLI payout procedures, instructions on how to appear credible as a military spouse, and most horrifying, a conversation from 2 weeks before our wedding where Vanessa wrote, "He's deploying to Helmand Province. High casualty rate. Should have the payout within months of deployment." Sutton replied, "Good work. Remember, play the grieving widow, attend the memorial, accept the flag, then disappear." I sat in Fleming's office while he showed me the evidence on a secure laptop. My stomach was churning. Rachel DeMarco sat across from me, her expression sympathetic but professional. "I know this is difficult," she said, "but this documentation proves premeditated fraud and conspiracy. We're arresting both of them today. Vanessa will be charged with fraud against military members, identity theft, and conspiracy. Sutton faces similar charges plus his role as an organizer. Based on what we've found, there may be more victims we haven't identified yet. You did the right thing by reporting this." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. "One more thing," DeMarco added. "Your deployment is going to be delayed pending the trial. The prosecution will need your testimony. Captain Reed is coordinating with your command. They're aware of the situation and fully supportive." The arrest happened that afternoon. Fleming and 2 other agents picked up Vanessa at the apartment. She tried to play innocent, crying, asking what was happening, claiming she loved me. They'd seen it before. She was transported to the county detention center and held without bail due to flight risk. David Sutton was arrested simultaneously at his apartment in Virginia. By evening, the story had broken locally. Military spouse arrested in benefits fraud scheme. My phone exploded with messages. My mother called, sobbing, apologizing for not seeing through Vanessa. My father was silent, the kind of silence that meant rage. Daniel drove to base and sat with me in the barracks, not saying much, just being there. Around midnight, Captain Granger called. "Your unit has your back," she said. "Focus on getting through this. We'll handle the deployment rescheduling. You're not alone." The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom wearing my dress uniform as the prosecution laid out the evidence. Financial records, text messages, recorded conversations, testimony from Bradley Colton and Gregory Penn, both of whom flew in to support the case. The defense attorney tried to argue that Vanessa had genuine feelings that soured after marriage, that the communications with Sutton were taken out of context. But the sheer volume of evidence was overwhelming. The judge denied bail again and set trial for 8 weeks out. I watched Vanessa during the hearing. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence shattered. When they led her out in handcuffs, she glanced at me once. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the target she'd thought I was. I was the man who'd survived her. Between the preliminary hearing and trial, the investigation expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. Special Agent DeMarco called me in for additional interviews as they uncovered more layers to the operation. They'd found evidence that Sutton had been running similar schemes for over a decade, targeting not just military members, but also first responders and government employees, anyone with stable benefits and life insurance. Vanessa had been working with him for nearly 5 years, learning the techniques, perfecting the approach. DeMarco showed me a training manual they'd recovered from Sutton's laptop. It was chilling in its detail: how to identify vulnerable targets at support groups, what military acronyms to learn, how to fake emotional connections, when to push for marriage, how to maximize insurance payouts. There was even a section on exit strategies if the target became suspicious. Reading it felt like reading an autopsy of my own relationship. Every moment I'd thought was genuine had been scripted, rehearsed, calculated. The prosecution team prepared me extensively for trial testimony. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Klein, a veteran prosecutor with 23 years handling fraud cases, walked me through what to expect. "The defense will try to paint you as paranoid, as someone who misunderstood normal marital stress," she explained during our 3rd prep session. "They'll bring up your deployment history, suggest combat stress made you interpret innocent comments as threats. They'll point to the 8 months of dating as evidence of a real relationship. You need to stay calm, stick to facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. Don't get emotional. Don't get defensive. Just tell the truth exactly as it happened." We practiced for hours, cross-examination scenarios, hostile questioning, attempts to discredit my character. By the time trial started, I was ready. I knew my testimony backward and forward. But nothing truly prepares you for sitting in a witness box and recounting the worst betrayal of your life, while the person who betrayed you sits 15 feet away. The night before I testified, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from our relationship. The first kiss, the proposal, the night she met my parents, the morning we went to get our marriage license. In every memory, I searched for the truth beneath the performance. Had there been any genuine moments? Any real emotion? Or had every second been calculation? I wanted to believe there'd been something real, even briefly, because the alternative, that I'd been completely fooled for 8 months, was almost unbearable. But DeMarco had shown me the messages. Vanessa had reported back to Sutton after our first date. Target acquired, military record clean, deployment scheduled, estimated timeline 6 to 8 months to marriage. Our first kiss had been data for her operation log. My proposal had been a mission milestone. The wedding had been her payday setup. There was nothing real. There never had been. Accepting that took more courage than anything I'd faced in combat. During the trial, the prosecution called a forensic psychologist, Dr. Kenneth Huang, who specialized in analyzing predatory fraud patterns. He'd evaluated Vanessa through prison interviews and psychological assessments. His testimony was devastating. Ms. Holbrook exhibits classic characteristics of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic traits, he explained to the jury. She demonstrates an inability to form genuine emotional attachments, a pattern of exploiting others for personal gain, and a complete lack of remorse for the harm caused. In my professional opinion, her interactions with the victims, including the defendant, were entirely transactional. She studied them to identify vulnerabilities, mirrored their interests and values to create false intimacy, and executed a predetermined plan with no deviation. This wasn't a relationship that went wrong. It was a criminal operation from inception. The defense attorney tried to challenge his credentials, tried to suggest alternative interpretations, but Dr. Huang had evaluated hundreds of similar cases. His testimony held firm. Watching him calmly dismantle any possibility that Vanessa had felt anything real was both validating and heartbreaking. The prosecution also brought in victims from Sutton's earlier operations, people who'd been targeted before Vanessa joined the scheme. A firefighter named Thomas Brennan from Oregon, who'd lost his wife and $80,000 to a woman Sutton had coached. A federal employee named Alicia Frost, who'd been manipulated into taking out multiple life insurance policies before her partner disappeared. Each story followed the same architecture: targeted vulnerability, manufactured intimacy, rushed commitment, financial exploitation. The jury heard 7 different versions of the same crime, spanning 12 years. By day 4, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't about a few bad relationships. This was about systematic predation. When Thomas Brennan broke down on the stand describing how he'd blamed himself for years, how he'd thought he'd somehow caused his wife to stop loving him, I saw myself in his pain. That had almost been my future, blaming myself, questioning my worth, never knowing I'd been targeted deliberately. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution brought 12 witnesses, including 3 forensic accountants who traced the money flow between Vanessa, Sutton, and several shell accounts. They revealed that over 4 years, the scheme had netted approximately $200,000 from 3 confirmed victims and attempted to defraud me of significantly more. The defense crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. On day 6, the jury deliberated for 90 minutes, guilty on all counts. Vanessa Holbrook was sentenced to 8 years federal prison. David Sutton got 12 years. The judge called it a calculated, predatory operation targeting those who serve our country. In his closing remarks, he noted, "The defendants exploited the trust and vulnerability of military members for financial gain, showing complete disregard for the human cost of their actions. This court will not tolerate such predation." The annulment was finalized 2 weeks after the sentencing. Captain Reed handled the paperwork personally, ensuring that the marriage was legally voided and that I had no financial obligations to Vanessa. My SGLI beneficiary was restored to my parents. All power of attorney documents were revoked. The joint bank account was frozen and investigated as part of the restitution process. I got back most of my money. The courts ordered Vanessa and Sutton to pay full restitution, though I doubted I'd ever see all of it. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about my name being cleared, my service record being protected, and my life being mine again. 3 months after the trial, my deployment orders came through. Different unit, different mission parameters, but I was going back overseas. This time, I was ready. On my last night before deployment, I met with Bradley Colton and Gregory Penn at a bar near base. We'd stayed in contact throughout the investigation, forming an unexpected brotherhood through shared trauma. "How are you doing?" Bradley asked. I considered the question. "Better. Angry, but better. At least now I know what love isn't." Gregory raised his beer. "To surviving predators." We clinked glasses. "You know what the worst part is?" I said. "I still don't understand how I missed the signs. I'm trained to assess threats, read people, identify danger, and I missed all of it." Bradley shook his head. "You missed it because you're not supposed to assess threats in a relationship. You're supposed to trust. She weaponized that. It's not a failure on your part. It's exactly what makes you human. Don't lose that." That conversation stayed with me through the entire deployment. Afghanistan was different this time. Not the danger or the mission, but my perspective. I was more careful, more guarded, more aware that trust had to be earned, not freely given. My squad noticed I was quieter, but they didn't push. Word had gotten around about what happened. Military communities are small and stories travel. A few guys pulled me aside to say they were glad I'd survived it, both literally and emotionally. Captain Granger checked in regularly via email, making sure I was mentally solid. I was. I'd come through the fire and found something stronger on the other side, a robber's clarity about who I was and what I deserved. I wrote letters to my parents, to Daniel, to Bradley and Gregory. I didn't write to Vanessa. She was exactly where she belonged. The deployment brought unexpected healing. Being back in a combat zone with a clear mission and identifiable threats was almost easier than navigating the emotional minefield Vanessa had created. Here, I knew who the enemy was. I knew what I was fighting for. I knew my brothers in arms had my back without question or calculation. Staff Sergeant Michael Rourke, our squad leader, became someone I confided in during long night watches. He'd been through his own divorce years earlier. Not fraud, just the slow dissolution of a marriage under deployment stress. The difference, he told me one night while we pulled guard duty, is that you know it wasn't your fault. My marriage fell apart because we both stopped trying. Yours was sabotaged from the beginning. That's not on you. His words helped more than any therapy session. I started to separate my self-worth from Vanessa's betrayal. She'd targeted me not because I was weak or naive, but because I was exactly what she needed for her scheme: stable, trustworthy, about to deploy. My strengths had been weaponized against me, but they were still strengths. During deployment, I also started speaking with a military therapist via secure video calls. Major Lisa Major Lisa Thornton, a clinical psychologist with the 82nd Combat Aviation Brigade, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me process not just the fraud, but the deeper wound, the violation of trust, the questioning of my judgment, the fear that I'd never be able to trust again. Betrayal trauma is unique, she explained during our 4th session. It attacks your fundamental sense of safety in relationships. Your brain learned that someone you loved was a threat. That's a confusing message to process. But here's what's important. You recognized the danger, you took action, and you protected yourself. Those instincts are solid. They just need recalibration, not replacement. We worked on identifying the difference between healthy caution and paranoid isolation. I learned that trust could be rebuilt gradually, with evidence over time, rather than given freely or withheld completely. The work was harder than any physical training, but by month 8 of deployment, I felt like myself again. Wiser, warier, but still fundamentally whole. The FOB, Forward Operating Base, where I was stationed, had internet access twice a week for personal communication. I used it to stay connected with Bradley and Gregory. We'd formed a text chain we called Survivors United, dark humor masking genuine support. They updated me on their lives. Bradley had started dating someone new, taking it slow, being honest about his history. Gregory had thrown himself into veterans advocacy work, helping other soldiers navigate benefits and legal issues. Their resilience inspired me. If they could move forward, so could I. Gregory sent me an article he'd written for a military lifestyle magazine about benefits fraud and how to protect yourself. It had gotten significant attention. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from service members sharing their own close calls or asking for advice. Your case started this, Gregory wrote. You going public through the trial made people aware this could happen. We're preventing future victims by talking about it. That perspective shift from victim to advocate changed everything for me. I came home from deployment after 11 months. No drama, no surprises, just the standard homecoming, family waiting, flags waving, tears and hugs and relief. My mother held on to me for a full minute, crying. My father gripped my shoulder and said, "Welcome back, son." Daniel drove me to my new apartment. I'd moved off base into my own place, a one-bedroom that was small but mine. Clean slate. That night, I sat on my empty couch and thought about everything that had happened. The wedding, the confession, the investigation, the trial, the healing. I'd lost a year of my life to Vanessa's scheme, but I'd gained something invaluable, the knowledge that I could survive betrayal and come out stronger. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to ask questions, to protect myself without closing off completely. And I'd learned that justice, while slow, was real. The reintegration into civilian-side military life took adjustment. I had to rebuild routines, reconnect with friends, find purpose outside of deployment. Captain Granger offered me a position as a squad leader trainer, teaching new soldiers about deployment readiness. I accepted, grateful for the structure and responsibility. The work was fulfilling, preparing younger soldiers for what they'd face overseas, making sure they understood not just combat protocols, but also personal readiness, including legal and financial protection. I started including a section in my training about benefits fraud. This happens, I'd tell them bluntly. People target military members because of our benefits. Learn the red flags. Trust your instincts. Don't rush major decisions like marriage right before deployment. And if something feels off, it probably is. Report it. Some soldiers laughed nervously, uncomfortable with the topic. Others listened intently, and a few pulled me aside afterward to ask questions or share concerns about their own relationships. I'd become the person I'd needed before I met Vanessa. someone who warned others and took the threat seriously. 6 months later, I got a message on social media from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Rachel, not DeMarco, different Rachel, and she said she'd heard my story through military spouse support groups. She wanted to thank me for speaking out because it had helped her recognize similar red flags in her own relationship. She'd ended things before marriage, before benefits fraud, before the trap closed. "You saved me," she wrote. "By being brave enough to report what happened, you saved me and probably others." I stared at that message for a long time. Saved someone. Not by fighting overseas, but by fighting for truth here at home. I wrote back, "You saved yourself. You saw the signs and acted. That's courage." But her words stayed with me. Maybe the worst experience of my life had meaning beyond my own survival. Maybe it had protected someone else. Rachel and I started corresponding occasionally, not romantically, just as people who understood the landscape of military relationship exploitation. She'd been approached at a veterans charity event by someone using textbook grooming tactics, excessive flattery, immediate intensity, knowledge of military culture that seemed rehearsed rather than lived. She'd felt uneasy, but couldn't articulate why until she read about my case in a military family support forum. The details matched too closely. She'd done her own investigation, found inconsistencies in his story, discovered he'd been married twice before to military members, uncovered social media evidence of financial troubles. She'd confronted him with evidence and walked away. "Your case gave me the vocabulary to understand what was happening," she wrote. "Before, I just felt guilty for doubting someone who seemed so sincere. After reading about the trial, I understood manipulation tactics. That knowledge saved me. Our exchanges reminded me that visibility matters. Shame thrives in silence. By refusing to hide what happened to me, I'd given others permission to trust their instincts." The FBI contacted me 18 months after the trial. They were developing educational materials for military bases about relationship fraud and wanted to interview me for a documentary-style training video. I agreed, despite my initial reluctance to revisit everything publicly. The interview took place at the FBI field office, filmed professionally with Special Agent DeMarco conducting the questions. They asked about the relationship timeline, the red flags I'd missed, the moment of realization, the investigation process, and the aftermath. I spoke for 3 hours, telling the complete story with all its uncomfortable details. The final video was 30 minutes, edited down to hit key educational points. It was distributed to military installations nationwide as part of pre-deployment briefings. Knowing that thousands of service members would see it, would learn from my experience, would potentially avoid their own version of Vanessa Holbrook, that made every difficult moment of the interview worthwhile. DeMarco told me afterward that the video had already generated dozens of reports from service members who recognized similar patterns in their own relationships. "You're preventing crimes before they happen," she said. "That's the best possible outcome." I'm 32 now. 5 years past the wedding that wasn't. I've dated carefully since then. Slowly, with eyes open, with questions asked and boundaries maintained. I've learned that real love doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't calculate. It builds gradually, earns trust through consistent action, and never makes you feel like a means to an end. I've learned to be vulnerable without being naive, to be open without being foolish. I've stayed in contact with Bradley and Gregory. We meet up once a year, share beers, trade stories about our lives after. We've all moved forward. We've all healed. But we remember, because memory keeps us sharp. Last month, I got a letter from the FBI. They'd identified 6 more victims of the Vanessa Holbrook and David Sutton fraud operation, going back 7 years before they targeted me. All military, all the same pattern. The investigation led to additional charges. Vanessa won't be eligible for parole for at least another 6 years. Sutton is looking at a decade minimum, and I'm free. 2 years ago, I met someone. Her name is Lauren, and she's a veterinarian who has no connection to the military world, which was initially terrifying and ultimately healing. We met at a dog park when my newly adopted rescue German Shepherd Atlas decided her golden retriever needed a friend. We talked for 20 minutes about dogs, then coffee, then nothing particularly deep. She gave me her number. I waited 3 days to call, analyzing every interaction, looking for manipulation tactics, searching for red flags. There weren't any. Just a woman who liked dogs and bad coffee and terrible action movies. Our first date was casual, lunch at a sandwich shop, walking around downtown, talking about our jobs and families and favorite books. She didn't ask about my benefits. She didn't push for personal information. She didn't mirror my interests suspiciously well. She was just herself, genuine, consistent, comfortable with silence. It took me 4 months to tell her about Vanessa. We were sitting on her couch watching a movie when I finally said, "There's something you should know about my past." I told her everything. The wedding, the confession, the investigation, the trial. I watched her face for calculation. For the moment, she'd see me as a meal ticket. Instead, I saw horror, empathy, and anger on my behalf. "That's unbelievable," Lauren said when I finished. "I can't imagine how violated you must have felt. Not pity, not judgment, just understanding." Then she asked, "Is that why you've been taking things so slowly with us? Why you analyze everything I say?" I admitted it was. "I get it," she said. "I'd probably do the same thing. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And she meant it. Over the next year, Lauren proved through consistent, patient action that she was exactly who she appeared to be. She introduced me to her family without fanfare. She paid for dates as often as I did. She had her own career, her own finances, her own life that existed completely independently of mine. She never asked about my insurance policies or deployment schedule or military benefits. When I finally told her I loved her, 14 months after we met, it was because I'd watched her be genuine in 1,000 small moments, and I trusted what I was seeing. She cried and said she loved me too, and I believed her. That's what Vanessa had almost stolen from me permanently, the ability to believe in love. Lauren helped me reclaim it. Sometimes people ask if I regret anything, meeting her, marrying her, going through with the wedding even after seeing red flags. I don't regret it anymore. I regret I didn't trust my instincts sooner, but I don't regret the experience itself. It taught me who I am. It showed me what I'm capable of surviving. And most importantly, it proved that predators can be beaten, that systems can work, that justice can happen if you're willing to fight for it. I wear my dress uniform sometimes for official events, and I still get compliments on wedding photos that are floating around online. Beautiful pictures of a moment that was entirely fake. I don't bother correcting people anymore. I just smile and say thank you, because those photos are evidence of something important. I survived, I fought back, and I won. That's the story I choose to tell now. Not the story of being a victim, but the story of being the soldier who wouldn't let himself be defeated, even by someone who'd vowed to love him. She bet on my death. I bet on my life. And I'm still standing. Last week, I spoke at a military family readiness event about relationship fraud and personal security. About 50 people attended, active duty members, spouses, veterans. I shared my story in detail, holding nothing back. When I finished, a young airman first class in the back raised his hand. "Sir, how do you trust anyone now? How do you let someone in after that?" I looked at him, recognizing my own fear in his question. "You trust slowly," I said. "You watch for consistency over time. You ask questions. You verify information. You don't ignore your instincts. And most importantly, you understand that one person's betrayal doesn't define everyone else's character. Real people can handle your caution. Predators can't. They need fast trust and rushed decisions. So slow down. Take your time. Real love waits. Fraud doesn't." After the event, 7 people came up to me privately to share their own stories. Some about near misses, others about ongoing investigations, one about a case that had already gone to trial. We exchanged contact information, forming another network of survivors and advocates. This was my mission now, I realized. Not just preventing my own future victimization, but helping others recognize, report, and recover from predatory fraud. Vanessa had turned me into a target. I'd turned myself into a shield for others. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.